Hi, everybody. It's Babos. This is Theater Resources Unlimited. It's our true Friday community gathering on Friday, August 12th. And I believe it's our 117th consecutive. If you're following the series on YouTube, or if you're following it in our podcast, I may get the number wrong from week to week. So last week may have been 118th, and I'm saying now it's the 117th. I always forget to check, but it's up there. We've been doing consecutive weeks of this. It's crazy what happened in our world 2.5 years ago. I think you all know what I'm talking about. We're talking about COVID. Suddenly, we were all in shutdown, and um, artists in shutdown is not a great thing. It's very difficult. Artists are people who like to communicate with other people. That's why we do what we do. um, and I was talking to a lot of people who are feeling very lost. April 17th, 2020, I did the first true community gathering. I opened up this room, and people came in here, and suddenly they found that there was a way for them to commune, to be a community, to be with other people and talk about art and talk about theater and talk about shutdown and talk about whatever that we needed to talk about to get through this. Uh, so I was very happy and very honored that people were coming into this room every Friday. Originally it was 4:30, now it's 5 o'clock, and meeting and talking. And I started bringing in people that were had interesting things to say about the business, and we talk about other things, like my favorite question. You're going to meet Voza soon, but Voza, my favorite question has always been: if we do theater on Zoom, is it still theater? So we've talked about that. We've talked about podcasts. We've talked about radio plays. We've talked about all sorts of things that we were trying to do during shutdown, so that we could just survive and feel creative and feel part of something, not so alone. And now we're part of this pandemic. I think we're officially coming out of shutdown. I think we've been out of shutdown, sort of, but now it's. I think there are official um, protocols that are being lifted. We no longer have to worry as much. Um, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be careful and shouldn't worry a little bit, because, as you know, there are variants that are coming out all the time. the most creative, the most creative part of shutdown has been COVID itself. As creative as the rest of us tried to be, COVID managed to outdo us. It just kept coming up with variations and variations and variations. And now we have vaccines, and we have treatments, and we have variations of COVID that aren't as deadly. But I just want to remind everybody that there are still some people out there who are very vulnerable, some people who can get very sick from this. So we should all be careful, and we all should also be we should all be mindful of each other. If COVID taught us nothing, at least it taught us that we have to be mindful of each other as we share this planet. It's not just our place; it's everyone's place. We're now talking about things outside of shutdown and outside of creating during COVID, although we still touch on it. You're going to meet a legend. I'm very honored to have Voza Rivers coming on with us today. I want to look at the history of diversity in theater, and nobody's seen it up front and personal more than Voza. He's been on the forefront of the changes that we're going through now. Um, I'm going to ask him things that are going to be, some of them are going to be tough questions, and some of them are going to be obvious things. Uh, Diversity in theater. Um, what has been the trajectory? What has been the path, the journey that we've gone through over the years? And those that can take us back pretty far. I'm going to bring him on now, and I want you to say hi to Voza Rivers. I want you to say hi to somebody who's been so influential in our business for so many years. And um, I'm kind of, when he first came into the room, he said some really nice things about me, and I was taken aback because I just think the world of Voza. I can't believe all the things he's done and all the. I mean, I should name some of the things. He's been a Broadway producer. He's been an off-Broadway producer. He's done music and events. He's produced documentary films. He's the founding member of the New Heritage Theater Group, executive producer and co-founder of Impact Repertory Theater, which has a youth division called the New Heritage Group that he'll tell you about. And I think one of the things he's most proud of right now is that he's the chairman of the Harlem Arts Alliance and vice president of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce and founder of their signature Harlem Week program. So, Boza, what do you do to keep busy? Do you do enough? And how did this all happen? How did you wind up becoming so active in theater and active in the arts? I have to be careful not to say theater because you're not just in theater, really. How would you define yourself?
Mm, I I'm a lucky guy. I started. I mentioned earlier before we were officially taping that at the age of 19, I had not seen a Broadway show. I was not involved in off-Broadway theater at all. And it was a by chance meeting of a man named Roger Furman who spoke so eloquently about his journey in theater when he was 19, 20 years old, the same age I was when he was a guest speaker to a forum that I attended. And when he spoke so eloquently around how theater changed his life, he became a professor at NYU and Hartford Stage Theater, et cetera, et cetera. It was interesting to me because he was talking about a theater that existed in 1940 called the American Negro Theater that was located on 135th Street in Harlem. I lived on 132nd Street in Harlem. So you're talking about a theater that was only 3 blocks away from where I lived. And he mentioned when he joined that theater that there were other actors who really became very well known and prominent, like Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee and Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, all gathering in a library in the basement of a library on 135th Street. It just so happened that that library was the same library that I went to because my teacher in junior high school made sure that once a week we would go to the library to read books and meet the librarian. So it was from that auspicious occasion that he mentioned that he was going to start a theater company. Now you're talking 24 years later, and that he was looking for a few people that would be interested in theater. I did not volunteer to be a part of that because that wasn't why I was at that course. I was curious, but not aggressive enough to say, "Oh, I raised my hand and I wanted to join." As he shared with me the history of Black theater, I made a commitment to be a volunteer to his theater company that he was forming and became one of the founding members of New Heritage Theater. And that is in 1964. We're now celebrating our 58th year, and we're the oldest Black nonprofit theater in New York State. And I've been there from day one.
Well, your story will resonate with a lot of people because you were a reluctant producer.
Yes.
I hadn't planned on going in this direction, but it's very relevant for what we do and how we run True. We encourage people to understand the business and understand producing, even if they're artists. what caused the you eventually embraced producing and embraced theater wholeheartedly, even though you started off the kid who lived 3 blocks away from where it was happening.
Yes.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about what you found about producing that you were attracted to? I think that'll be very important for some people.
Well, because I was mentored by a producer, director, screenwriter, playwright, Roger Furman, I uh, I could easily understand what he was doing, and because I was also by his side, it was just natural for me to pick up some of the qualities that he had. And one of the things that he did, and he mentioned to me because he was also a playwright and a director and a set designer, is that there's a whole history of Black theater from 200 years ago. And there's current theater that he wanted to make sure that he added to the opportunity to create and produce his own work. And so when he decided to start his theater, an offer was made for him to start his theater in the Village. And he turned that down and said, I want to be in Harlem, where I first got my training, and that I want to produce theater for the people in the community and not commercially. And I took that. That's a bold thing to do when you're being offered an opportunity to create a theater in the Village where he lived. Actually, he lived in the Village, and he decided not to do that. And for me, it was understanding his commitment. And that was the same track that I followed. I wanted to be committed to the community that I loved, and understanding the history and the importance of that community and those who came before me. It was natural. So there was nothing magic about me saying that I wanted to produce, other than my mentor was a producer, and I wanted to follow and make him proud of what I was doing and what I learned from him.
So uh, I hear you talking about your dedication to your community. Um, was there any frustration about getting the Black voices out into the wider theater world, or was that just not a concern of yours back then because you had a
It,
comfortable community at that point?
yes, it wasn't. But after Furman died, and I wanted to expand the presentations of New Heritage, I looked beyond Harlem, beyond just the Black voices in the United States, and decided that I wanted to go much broader. And so I looked at work by American Indians. I looked at work by white writers in London, and in fact had selected productions that included, let's say, a South African play with a integrated cast, and a theater in London and a theater in Harlem, and opening the play on the same night in London and in Harlem with a play about South Africa, with a Black with the actors being white and Black, and it was those kind of things that I mixed up that people were very attracted to.
What was that play? Just for everybody knows, that wasn't
Uh,
Voza Albert or
no, it wasn't any of those.
none of
It
the
wasn't
wasn't
any of those.
Serafina.
This
No, okay,
no, this is pre that.
yeah.
Pre that, yeah. I can't even think of the name of the play now, but it was something that I wanted to experiment with and do. And of course, that led to other opportunities. Gary McAvey was a person that I knew who headed Columbia Artist Management, and he was bringing in plays from South Africa. I went to the Lucille Hotel Theater to see the work, And I was amazed at what was being produced from South Africa in the village. Again, it's the village. And after the production, and it was called Woza Albert, was over, I was taken backstage to meet the actors. The theater was sold out. The play had been off Broadway for about 8 weeks, and they did the sold out performances, and they won the Obie Award. And I didn't know anything about the play or the actors. So when Gary introduced me to the two actors, and they asked, "What do I what do I do?" And I mentioned, "Oh, I have a small theater up in Harlem, blah 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 blah." And they said, "Well, how come we're here and we've played the sold out audience and we haven't seen people that look like you?"
There
And
you go.
that
There,
and
we hit
that
one of the major issues. Yeah.
yes, and I said, "Well, I have a theater uptown, and if my friend from South Africa didn't invite me to see you guys downtown, I wouldn't have heard about the play." There was no marketing to the community uptown. And if you're not reading the New York Times to get, a listing, it doesn't reach us. It just doesn't reach us. And they told me, "Voza, you have a theater in Harlem. We've heard about Harlem. We want to go to Harlem. And can you bring us?" I said, "No, I can't bring you to Harlem. You're here under an equity production contract, and the producers that brought you here brought you specifically for the Lucille Lortel production. And that's what you have to do. You're tied into Lucille Lortel's theater." They told Gary, "Gary, you have to find a way that we can go to perform in Harlem." And then Gary McAvey, who passed about 3 or 4 months ago, said to me, "Voza, these guys have to go back to South Africa. Would it be okay if they come up to see your theater? Because whatever comes out of that, they're on their own before they go back, and they've finished their obligation to me." And that opportunity came where I said, "I'd love to take you to Harlem. And if you come to Harlem, you're going to have to do some of the play. The New York Times wrote an article, "From Soweto to the Village to Harlem," front page of the weekend section. And it brought Gary McAvey, Lucille Lortel, Bernie Gersten from the Lincoln Center Theater, Greg Mosher, Joseph Papp, all coming to Harlem to see this play. And from that moment, those guys performed as if they were back home in South Africa. It was an unbelievable opportunity, and that led and opened the door for me to do work with South African actors.
That's a moment of great hope and great joy. The frustrating thing is that, as we know today,
Yes.
it's taken a long time for that joy to spread. So, um, what has what has it been like from your point of view, from your perspective in Harlem, seeing how slow Broadway and commercial theater and actually the rest of the country has been to embrace BIPOC voices? Has it been something that you've been very aware of and very frustrated by, or is it something that you had your own community, so you were comfortable? What was it like for
I
you?
had my own community. Roger was also gay. And I went everywhere with him. In fact, a lot of people thought that I was his male partner because he took me everywhere, and I appreciated that, and I loved him for it. And but when he started his theater, there was an offer for him to be in the village, and he said, "No, I want to go to Harlem." So following what he shared with me, I knew that this is where I need to be. And I wasn't concerned about what other people were doing, because there were a number of Black theaters at that time, and they were doing work by African American writers. I made a decision that for the first 20 years being with Roger, I did the same thing. A lot of these shows now are going to Broadway, but we did them early on in our 150-seat black box theater in Harlem. And people would come, they would be educated, they would enjoy, they would interact with the actors, but more importantly, it was Black theater. And I did that for 20 years with Roger Furman. When he died, I wanted to expand his vision, and I started looking at new works, and the new works and the doors that opened up for me was really South Africa. Because not only did I do Woza Albert, I did Asena Mali, I did Sarafina, I did Township Fever, all plays from South Africa, all big musicals. And I was fortunate enough, because of the very first show I did, people from Lincoln Center said, we want to work with you. So when Joseph Papp left Lincoln Center and Bernie Gersten was his partner, Bernie stayed at Lincoln Center and became the executive producer of Lincoln Center Theater. And Lincoln Center Theater came up to Harlem to see the work by these Black South Africans that I was doing in my small theater. And that formed a relationship between myself personally and the leadership at Lincoln Center. And so as I continued to do work with South Africa, I had a big time partner called Lincoln Center saying, I want to work with you, Voza, and let's continue working together to bring this kind of theater to not only what you're doing in Harlem, but to Lincoln Center. And we created festivals together, et cetera.
And then we go back to one of the things you said earlier, which is the audiences, bringing Black theater and Black voices into commercial theater had its merit and was very, very positive and a great step. But I don't think we understood how to get Black audiences in those days, or how successful. Did Serafina have a well-attended BIPOC community?
Yes, we had the largest advanced sales for a Black show on Broadway when we went to Broadway, but we didn't go to Broadway first. So the show was developed at the Market Theater in South Africa, and then it came to Harlem because the same writers who was in that very first South African play that I saw said to me, we want you to produce. So they came to me based on my relationship of doing two of their earlier works and said, we have a play for you. It's a musical. And I said, wow, this is really great. And we want to premiere it in Harlem at your theater. I said, great. I said, well, how many characters? How many members in the cast? They wouldn't tell me. They said, Voza, you have to do this musical that we want to do in Harlem. I said, what am I missing? You guys, your first play, there were 2 actors. The second play were 5. How many people are in the company? When they told me it was 35, I said, guys, this is way above my pay grade. I can't do a show with 35 actors in my small theater in Harlem. They said, Voza, you have to do the play. Then I went to Greg Mosher at Lincoln Center. Greg and I went to South Africa to see the play. Greg was very, very excited and said, Voza, we want to do that at Lincoln Center. Not a problem. So what happened is it went to Lincoln Center on an extended run. And the problem was that Blacks could not get tickets because of Lincoln Center's membership. Their membership at that time was growing, and they were doing white plays. And now they have a Black show from another country at Lincoln Center, and the membership was buying up all the tickets before it could come out to the public. So they had an internal opportunity to see this work. Bernie Gersten was aware of that and said, Voza, you know what I want to do? Because a lot of people can't see this play that look like you. So what I'd love to do is to put X number of tickets aside for each production and make them available to you to invite people from your community. And we did that for a number of weeks. I think it was 20% of the house I had tickets for. And as a result of the show being sold out completely at Lincoln Center, Bernie Gersten asked me again, Voza, if we went to a larger house, would Black people come to see the play? I said, Bernie, absolutely. And we made a decision to go into the Court Theater, which will now be the James Earl Jones Theater. And we went to the Court Theater with Sarafina, and it had the largest advanced sales of any Black show on Broadway. And after that, we worked with creating a second company that did the national tours, and we had two other companies in South Africa and in Africa also simultaneously with the same show, Sarafina. So all of a sudden I was responsible for 3 different productions of Sarafina, not only here in the United States, but also in South Africa, because those guys that I worked with in South Africa said, you must be a part of what we do. If anyone wants to see our work or book us, they have to come through you. So they validated me. I wasn't in a position that I was looking for, but there was something about our relationship. And because of that, a lot of other things started happening for me.
Well, you had a lot of personal success with bringing diversity into our theater world. I'm not sure whether the rest of the business has been as successful. We became very conscious of it. There was, I know you know at the beginning of shutdown, there was We See You White American Theater, and
Yes.
there was a lot of frustration and anger,
Yes.
justified anger that was expressed about our business. What do you think that we're making progress now? Do you think that we're finally at a point where we're going to be more genuinely inclusive, not token inclusive, but genuinely inclusive?
I think that because of COVID and all of the health challenges, it caused a pause. Theaters had to take a pause. The government, on the other hand, and the elected officials, et cetera, looked at theater and Broadway as an economic engine. And what they did is they poured money into the big guys, the bigger theaters, to keep them on a lifeline until COVID passed. And part of those dollars went toward producing and presenting work by people of color. That was part of it. And I welcomed that. I was not on the receiving end of any of that because, again, I was insulated with my own community, and they validated me every single day that I walked the streets, and people would say, hey, Voza, I saw this production or that at your theater. And because I lost the physical theater space, I had many opportunities to go to colleges and universities in Harlem to do the work. I went to the churches, I went to the museums to do the work. And I was developing this audience that I could take with me wherever I was going. So it wasn't an opportunity to say, oh, you're going to Broadway. It was an opportunity to do the work. I don't know if the same kind of strategy or sensibilities of how I did theater and how the theaters on Broadway who are now embracing multiculturalism and all of the new catchwords on how they describe what we're doing. I don't know if it's sustainable, because there was a period that, if we go back in time in the 60s and 70s, where there was a proliferation of Black films. and everyone talked about Black films and Black actors. And that period was great. And then it passed and then went back to normal of what it was pre of that movement.
That's what we're all afraid of. I mean, forget culture and forget theater. Just equity in our culture and in our society. We saw Rodney King. We saw
Yes.
person after person that was mistreated, um, and we always thought that was that was going to be a turning point. Something was going to have to be done. Nothing was ever done. And then we had George Floyd, and then suddenly there seemed to be a different energy. Um, I think because we were in shutdown, we couldn't turn away.
Yes.
So I think everybody was forced to actually look at it and acknowledge what was going on. And little by little, there are incremental changes that are being made. But I'm hoping it sticks. I'm hoping that Jello sticks on the wall this time. But I think I'm with you. I think I'm not exactly certain that it's going to actually be sustainable. I think is the word you used. What are your thoughts? Anything more positive than what I'm saying?
No, and I've shared it with others. I think what's important is to understand the history of the culture, the history of Black theater, the history of those Black playwrights and actors who were brilliant at what they did during their time period, but never really being acknowledged and given the right opportunity, or if the power structure, the B, took one or two of those actors and placed them, that was great. But it didn't change the reality that there was still this really big divide between theaters of color and what was happening downtown. And the myth is that you are validated because you're off Broadway or on Broadway, and that never it never made me happy about that, because people would say, "Oh, Voza, you should be downtown." Why should I be downtown? I could get one bad review and the show would close. I can be in my own community creating and not being judgmental that my show would close. My show would only close if the people came and didn't like what they saw. But I wouldn't be judged by a critic saying this show doesn't hit the mark, and then people being influenced by what the critic says as opposed to the experience. And I wanted to make sure that people experienced our theater. Our admission was low to no cost at all. And those were the kinds of things that I brought to what I do. Even to this day, I work with the museums, libraries, and I do free programming.
So we're putting in a word for finding our community. I used to say, I used to always want to win a Tony Award. I'm a playwright. I'm a writer, and I used to dream of that. And I switched my dream. My dream was basically to find a community, as you're saying, that appreciated what I do. And I think that's a goal that a lot of us should keep in mind. We don't necessarily have to be successful to be on Broadway or be off Broadway.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's not always easy to find the right community. I shouldn't say that, because if you open yourself up to the universe usually leads you to the right place.
That's right.
So I think I'll switch to that. I think that's where I'm going to be right now. You, in dealing with your community, you've actually gone beyond the arts and beyond theater. You've actually been part of the political community as well in Harlem. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, yes, because of the role that I play. Well, arts advocacy.
Yeah.
When I created the Harlem Arts Alliance as an art service organization, I started with a handful of arts organizations, and it happened around 9/11. We met the day before, and there were a dozen of us talking about the need to come together and work. The next day was 9/11, And we met a month later. So I had a meeting the day before with about 12 organizations talking about advocacy and the need for us to come together to work together. 911 happens. And then in the October meeting, we had about 30. In the November meeting, about 75. By the end of the year, we had over 300 members, art service organizations, theaters, uh, dance companies, film companies. We had individual artists all wanting to join this movement of working together in their communities. And because of my relationship with downtown, I also invited the downtown organizations to become members of the Harlem Arts Alliance. And in 1 year, we had over 850 members, and we were meeting monthly. And that began the engagement of the political structure in our community by saying, my God, look what Voza has done with all of these groups. How can we support it? And so we created something called Harlem Arts Advocacy Week. And there were so many organizations doing something in Harlem. After 3 years, we created Harlem Arts Advocacy Month. And that still exists today. And the month of October, where we actually highlight those shows, those directors, those dance companies, those theaters that are still doing the work, that are under the radar, not being recognized or reviewed by the mainstream press, but continue to do the work. And that's what I want people to be proud of. It's about the work. And if you believe in the work, you'll find a way to continue that if you stay the course.
Well, that's words of encouragement that I think all of us can take to heart. Um, Tell me, the Harlem Arts Alliance is a little different than the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your work with the Chamber of Commerce
Well,
and
the chamber,
how that relates to everything else that you do. I mean, it sounds like it all fit.
yeah.
You
Well,
all
well,
have everything in a
yeah.
pattern.
Well, there was a borough president by the name of Percy Sutton. He was the borough president of Manhattan. And Percy Sutton owns radio stations, and he reopened the Apollo Theater. And it was in the 70s and Percy Sutton lived in Harlem, where we looked around in our community and it was devastating with crack cocaine and all of the other ills at that time of what was happening in New York City. That was the same year that the Gerald Ford said to in the press, New York City dropped dead. They weren't going to get federal support. But Percy Sutton said, listen, if we live in this community and we've inherited this history of what had happened before during the Harlem Renaissance, et cetera, that we should do a one-day event celebrating our history and culture. And that's what we did in 1974, one Sunday. And the defining moment of what we did was we were on 138th Street and 7th Avenue. And we decided and got the political support to rename 7th Avenue Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard, the first time in the history of New York City that they named a street after a person of color. And it was that moment that we did that, and we had the celebrities that come out, and we knew that we needed to do it again a year later. And a year later, it grew to a few weeks as opposed to one day. And eventually it became a month. The Greater Harlem Chamber was the vehicle that organized the people to come out for that one-day event. And about 30 years ago, I joined the board of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, and I became the chairman of their Arts and Culture Committee. And so again, it was politics, it was economic development, and it was culture, all playing at the same time. And I was intricately involved in all three of those areas, and still to this day.
It's pretty amazing, Voza. You're remarkable. Tita says you were a soft-spoken organizational genius with a rare ability to merge artistic sensitivity with massive political organizing, which is true. I mean, I, I just don't. I don't even know what you've accomplished so much. Um, you really have accomplished so much within theater and within your community, and merging the two of them is a goal that I think a lot of us have, and I think you are a great model for many people. Um, I would ask if there's anybody in the room who wants to ask a question or make a comment. You know, you can use your virtual hand raise, which is in your reactions button down underneath your screen, um, or you can turn on your mic and you can just ask a question as well. Let's see, is anybody asking? Nope. I think everybody's just speechless. Truly, I don't. I think what you have done in many ways are things that I've aspired to do myself. I have created a community here. I haven't. I've reached out into the political world in the past 2 years. We've had politicians who've come in and have talked about the topic that I generically call politics and the arts. But I'm not sure whether I have the energy that you have to be as politically active as you've been. I put so much energy into what I do with True, and I'm sure that you must put in an enormous amount of artistic energy with your companies. How do you do it?
I'm blessed. I can't explain to you. I'm blessed. I have, I have 3 kids. Well, I just lost my son I lost my son in June. Was 52 years old. In December, I'll be 80 years old. And I'm fortunate that there's so many good people around me. People ask, well, do you have a casting agent? Do you do this? Do you do that? And it's my heart that speaks to me. When people come up to me or they ask me to read something and I read it, and I make those decisions also. I have an artistic director, but he says, Voza, you deserve to be the person that make those decisions. I will support you. My partner, his name is he's a full professor, Jamal Joseph, and I met him when he came out of prison, and when he came out of prison after doing 9 years in Leavenworth prison, he had received all of his degrees through his master's degree, and for the last 25 years he's been a professor at Columbia University and the former chair of the graduate film program. So with him and meeting him when he came out of prison and joining forces with him, we've done over 51 documentaries. And so that's just another addition. And he's the one who helped me talk about children and adding children to what we were doing as a theater company. We changed the name to New Heritage Theater Group. And as under the group banner, New Heritage Theater Group, we have adopted other theater companies that didn't have the right kind of resources so that they could continue to work. And Bob, when you called and reached out to me, it was around Becoming Othello that was going to be at the National Black Theater Festival in North Carolina. Well, that young lady,
Deborah Ann Bird.
Deborah Ann Bird, she worked with me when she was in college. And I was running something called the Victoria Theater on 125th Street, right next to the Apollo Theater. And she was the administrative person. And over the years, I just watched her and blossom, and she had her own theater company.
Take Wing and Soar.
Take Wing and Soar. And when Take Wing and Soar had financial difficulties and stability, I said, Deborah, don't worry about it. I'll work with you. And then we created the Harlem Shakespeare Festival. And together, that we made sure that whatever she wanted to do around classical work, that I would be there as her partner in making that happen.
Deborah's very interesting in many ways. She's a good friend of mine, and known her for many years, and she's been speaker for me many times. But she is very committed to
Yes.
black faces in classics. She takes on roles that, I mean, she did Importance of Being Earnest. She was Lady Bracknell last year, I think, or 2 years
Yes.
ago.
Yes. Yes.
And she has a vision and a passion that is very interesting and very intriguing. Um, I remember Maya Katigbak from Pan Asian, not Pan Asian, the Asian American theater company. Maya once said the same thing. As a person of color, many artists, many actors long for roles that they would not normally be cast in, just so that they can show those experiences. So they can show an Ibsen play, they can show a Chekhov play with non-traditional casting that expresses the message of the play and yet puts it into a whole new context. So I've always been interested in that, and I miss how did Othello, becoming Othello, go in North Carolina?
The writings and the salutations and the presentation was exceptional. Everyone who's seen it, and I have a whole bunch of congratulation notes uh, because of Deborah Ann's work.
Yeah,
And I can't wait till she comes back. I mean, the play has traveled. In fact, she became a scholar at the Shakespeare Trust, which is responsible for all of Shakespeare's work around the world, giving permission to organizations to do Shakespeare. And she became a fellow there. And the people who run it were so impressed that they actually booked her and us to do Becoming Othello in London for them. So we've done a lot with it. We are finishing up the documentary film that should be ready by the end of this year. We've been filming it as she goes along, and it's been really a wonderful journey together.
well, she's deserves all the success in the world. She's a terrifically gracious and loving person. Um, I'm looking to see whether there are any other. Okay, here's a question from Tita. When you went to a place like Lincoln Center and other downtown large organizations, did you have a particularly effective way of getting them to see the value and benefit of working with you? Um, Particularly when so many might ignore your proposed partnerships. I guess what she's saying is you make it sound very easy. You make it sound like it just happened, uh, but what was it about your presentation of your work, and what was it about the partners that you found that was different? Because it doesn't always happen this way.
Well, I think what happened today when you started introducing me to the people on this Zoom call, uh, that people interact with me, with my personality, and they make a determination that this is a person I can work with. This is a person that I should know. I didn't go downtown. When I mentioned that I did my first South African play, downtown came uptown to my small theater. That's how I met Joe Papp. And I did a production with Joe Papp. I met Greg Moshe, artistic director of Lincoln Center, and I did work there. I met Peter Brook, one of the world esteemed directors, and got a chance to produce Peter Brook's work because 4 of the plays that I produced in Harlem, Peter Brook also produced them on his own in Europe. And so that kind of history. And so when Peter Brook created this wonderful play called Tieno Bokar, and it had the European tour and was doing wonderful, Peter Brook said, I want to come to the United States to do this production, which is so different from some of the other things that he had done, and that he did not want to go to the Brooklyn Academy of Music. He wanted to be in a community of color. And he went to Columbia University And Columbia University said, well, there's a person that we work with, Peter. And Peter says, yes, I know, because when he did the South African play, I got off of a plane to go to his small theater because I was interested in an actor who was in that play, to see if the actor would leave the play to come and do one of my plays. And the actor said no. And Peter got on a plane and went back to Paris. It was that kind of opportunity that that I'm just fortunate that people like me, and I don't go with hat in hand asking people to work with me. It just evolves, and that's the way I do what I do.
I think we have a lot in common. Sounds familiar. So let's see. I'm looking to see if there's any. Carolyn Harrison, thanks you for you don't have to chase what you can attract. Thank you, Voza, for your power of attraction fully functioning. There's lots of nice comments to you in the chat.
Yes,
I don't know if you've been reading
yes.
them. Okay.
Yeah, no, I've been reading it. Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of some brilliant way to wrap this up. It's like I have to say that we go back about 25 years or more.
That's right.
When I first reached out to you towards the beginning of True, you were my exemplification of international theater, producing international theater, because you had brought products in from South Africa, and so I felt like you had an international focus. Little did I know that you really had a community focus.
Yes, yes.
But you also had the wisdom to see what was of value and actually bring it and share it with your community. That's another thing that is magical about you, is the fact that you seem to not only know what you like, but what you like and what is attractive to you seems to be attractive to your community as well. Did you have any disappointments, any things that you brought in that people didn't like, that you thought, oh, gee, what happened?
Nothing.
I mean, it has to happen once.
Well, I can't really say that that's the case. I mean, there may be things that some people didn't like that never came to my attention, because I constantly did what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and I always had an audience.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't hear from the people who don't like it.
Yes, but there were very limited occasions when I did not have a full house, and that was also something that I knew I was on the right track, and I was really following the same path of Roger Furman and Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee. I had that, and they would even come by the theater to check in on me. So there was a lot of good stuff around what I was doing back then. And I was very humble and appreciative of being on the receiving end on that kind of wisdom.
One specific that you didn't tell us, you talk about your theater as being small. How many seats is your theater?
150.
150?
Yes.
Okay. That gives us actually a perspective on it. Are there any more questions from the room? Oh, wait, talk more about that. Catherine, what did you want him to talk more
Hold
about?
on for 1 second.
Okay.
AD.
And I'll edit this out for YouTube.
I'll be right back. Yes. Okay, sweet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So, Catherine, what is it that you want him to talk more about? You can actually just put on your mic and tell us.
He said, you said, I knew I was onto something when I didn't have a full house.
Oh.
No, I didn't.
Oh, what did you say? What did you say?
No, I said that there was very
unusual.
Very unusual not to have a full house. So there were most of the productions that we did, once we put it up, we had full houses. I would say probably 95% of the time.
That's pretty magical.
Wow.
Yeah, inclement weather might have reduced the number of people because it was a walk up. We were on the top floor of a building. We built the theater. Roger had me and taught me how to paint sets and focus lights and all those other things that I learned along the way. And yeah.
Wow.
So I do have a question. So if you didn't, in the very rare circumstance that you did not have a full house, did you ruminate on that? Did you try to like think about,
No,
cool,
no, I started working on the next presentation, but like I said, that was not the norm.
right,
Almost
right,
everything that we did, we had full houses. So
right,
yeah.
right. Sweet.
So Tina asks what I guess a lot of people are wondering, what's coming up? What are you doing next? Do you have any productions coming up?
Yeah. There's an actor named Daniel Beatty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He is one of my people in residence.
What was his
Daniel
one?
Beatty,
He did a one-person show a couple years ago. Dan Beatty.
yeah, he played 54 characters
Yeah.
in that production. And I went on to produce four of his plays also. So we're working on another presentation of a play by Daniel Beatty. There is another woman by the name of Esther Amar, and I've done four of her plays, and she lives in Ghana and in London. And in October, she and I will be coming together to look at her work. That there are people who want to come to Harlem, and they're not looking at big spaces. And I give them that opportunity to come to an engaging audience to see the work. I just not only are we doing physical productions, but we're also doing documentary films. So I just finished doing a project on Louis Armstrong called Little Satchmo, and we did it at the Museum of the City of New York. And that was the first time I've been back to the museum in about 10 years, because I used to be there regularly, but the administration changed, et cetera. And the vice president who arranged for me to be there to screen the film, and it was free admission. They want to build that audience they used to have when I was there. So this was just a start. So there'll be, oh, somebody saw it.
Yeah.
Little
Carolyn Harrison saw it.
Okay, but so this is what I'm saying. These types of things that I do, I help organizations also build audiences by doing the work that I do.
Well, that's comes right back to you being part of a very crucial part of the community, doing very blessed work. I'm, I don't even know what to say. I mean, you've done so much and you've been so important to your community. It doesn't necessarily answer the questions about diversity in general and the things that are going on commercially and the things that are going on culturally right now, where we're taking some steps forward and some even stupider steps backward. There's voter repression going on, and the country is a mess. The country is a mess. Do you worry about that, Voza, or do you take comfort in your community? And
I worry like everyone else, but I don't dwell on it. There's a lot of good things that are happening, and you got to take, close the book, stop watching the news, and go into reading, go into other activities that takes you away. Otherwise, you become paranoid. And so again, the types of presentations that I do, I've combined music and dance and theater, and I'm constantly mixing it up. Lincoln Center, I mentioned years ago at Lincoln Center, but I just did a magnificent event at Lincoln Center on the 3rd of August in their outdoor space. And that presentation was something that I did. Well, last year I did Deborah Ann Bird, and this year I brought Cubans over from Cuba and Harlem to do a dance presentation. I also invited the ambassador from South Africa to see it, and I invited the ambassador from Cuba, and they saw an Afro-Cuban dance company. And they were blown away by what they saw. Lincoln Center, they said, Voza, you got to do this again next year. It's just those kind of things. And then the ambassador from one country meet the ambassador for the other at a cultural event, an outdoor cultural event, and they brought their wives.
A question comes up sometimes in my community about what is a creative producer. I think you're the answer. So you really produce from passion. We talk about passion, producers
Yes,
having passion
yes,
all the time,
yes.
but it is so clear that you are unabashedly passionate about what you do, and you bring in things because you love them. You love. Sounds like you love everything that you bring in. But I'm
Yes.
curious. Have you ever actually taken place in the artistic part of it, the creation of any of the pieces, or do you just
I
bring in
say
the people?
no. I say no. My partner says that I put a creative spin on everything that I do, but I don't see it that way. I see me being the guy that make things happen. But a lot of the things that I make happen come to me in a package, meaning that those are, would you like to do this? I'll read the script or I'll hear the music, or there may be actor friends that I have that are in the play. And I said, oh yeah, I'll support it. And a lot of times it may be sight unseen. It's my heartbeat talking to me.
You've led a good life. You're so blessed. Like you said, you're very blessed, and we're very blessed to have you among us. I'm going to ask one more time if anybody has anything that they want to ask Voza, or any comments that you want to make. Um, and if not, then we're going to just thank you for being with us today. And I'm going to say some final words. I'm going to, again, thank Voza Rivers for being our guest today. We're extremely lucky to have you, and thank you for making the time to be with us. Very much appreciated. For those of you who are out there in YouTube land, or we're going to be publishing these as podcasts as well. If you want to be part of the conversation, you want to be in the room, consider joining us on Fridays at 5 p.m. If you want to be put on the list, it's trunltd@aol.com. Email me at trunltd@aol.com, and we'll send you an invitation to come into the Zoom room with us, and you'll be able to ask questions and be part of the community. I also want to remind everybody that we do this for free. Happy to serve the community. Even happier now that I've met and heard from Voza. And if you want to support us, we do take donations, so consider donating to us. It's trudonate.com, trudonate.com. That's it, everybody. You can all come back into the room now, and we'll meet and gather together.